Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms Presents a Gamemasters Workshop. Today we have some really awesome guests. First, the owner of Left Justified Studios and Prolific Games. He's a game designer, developer, and writer. He's worked on many board games and role-playing games such as Pieces of Eight, Dragon Age RPG, Mercante. Please welcome Jeff Tidball to the Game Masters Workshop. Right next to him, he's the owner of Leader Games, one hell of a board game designer. He's designed and worked with some of the most well-received games in the modern era, such as Root and Vast. Please welcome Patrick Leader to the Game Masters Workshop. And
Hello.
last but definitely not least, our final guest may have the wildest energy in game design. He's the owner and lead designer for Fight in a Box Games, designing games like Mouse, Cheese, Cat, Cucumber, Squirrel or Die, and Processing. Please welcome Seppy Yoon to the Game Masters Workshop. I've had you all on the podcast, the Epic Realms podcast, and we all three of you chatted a little bit about role-playing games and talked about your guys's, your history and kind of like playing with your personal groups or your friend groups or, at a convention or with people and whatnot. And it's really cool that I was able to get you guys all on the same show because you guys all have kind of the same backgrounds when it comes to careers and game design. And it's like, I thought it would be really interesting maybe to garner a couple of the questions a little bit more towards board game design as well because here's the thing. We've all been that time where you're in a bar and you're like, I want to compete against somebody, compete against darts or compete against something. And sometimes the role-playing system we're playing doesn't necessarily have mechanics for that, and you guys have to, sometimes as a GM you have to kind of design something on the fly or come up with something in advance. So how do you incorporate mini games into your RPG sessions or making custom games for your RPG systems? And again, an example that I gave you guys was Wizards of the Coast came out with the Three Dragon Ante game. So we'll start with Jeff. Jeff, what is something that you can think of or you work on, and you've worked on some role-playing games yourself, so let us in on your vast knowledge.
I should be the second or third person to answer this because my answer is a total bummer.
Okay.
Or I can lead with a bummer.
Okay, you did lead with a bummer.
I think we're all gonna be a bummer. We'll see how this goes.
My answer is that I do not do it.
Okay.
Because the reasons that I like to role play revolve almost entirely around story and drama, and I have not ever had an experience where a mini game inside an RPG enhanced story or drama, and really have only had experiences where I'm like, wait a minute, we're gonna now play the weird game with the like. I'm gonna out a particular GM by accident if I give any more specific examples. I've had experiences where it really detracted from what I thought was the fun part of the story and the drama, which is why I'm usually really role playing. So I haven't seen that. I have not experienced that done successfully, and so I try to avoid it in my own like running and playing. Now, certainly we'll go back in time and discover, and somebody's going to pull something off their shelf where I did that and published it or something like that. That is almost certainly true. But like today in 2022, I would not do it in a game that I was running because it's not, it's just not to my taste. That's not what I'm looking for in an RPG.
Well, that's still that, that's not a bummer or a downer. That's sage advice and a sage point of view for the conversation. So I mean, everybody, and that's the thing with this show, not everybody's gonna agree on everything, and that's the thing. Like, part of role playing is everybody likes something different, and you've got to cater your games to your players, or to even sometimes to yourself. Patrick, what are your thoughts on putting like mini games or playing games within the games, or having characters play games and running that?
I super agree with Jeff. I'm also going to be a downer. So the closest I've got to enjoying something like that is one of the second series of Pathfinder modules back when they were still for D&D and not for Pathfinder yet. Had this wonderfully overchrome chase scene where the players are running across the rooftops of this town. And there's all these you present the players with these index cards showing kind of like the challenges and the routes that they can go across the rooftops. And I thought that was fun. But it's so kind of because the die rolls it didn't quite land. So
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
then-
those, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then in the next scene, they played something like football with, or like rugby with their characters. And that also, just because there's a barbarian in the party, like they just, like, okay, well, I can run all the way to the goal in one move. So meaner. So it's kind of boring. No, beyond like really overchromy maps with like rotating pieces or something like that, I don't think I would do anything like that.
Okay.
Seppy.
Well, first of all, I think that's the start of a joke, and you should get the stream to start with Patrick Leader, Jeff Tidball, and Seppy walk into a bar, and then at the end, and the
And then Fat Trombone.
Yeah, and then Fat Trombone. I, of course, understand what the two of them are saying, but my players know that they're up for some shenanigans. I add probably 8 flavors of mini games. That's probably hyperbole. It's at least 4 types of mini games to my games on the regular. Okay. So first of all, boss battles are a mini game on themselves. Normally my bosses will not just go down if you throw fireballs until they go to 0. That is just not how it works. Then meta games, like things that the game isn't particularly got good mechanics for, I will use abstractions to make it more, the players feel like they have more agency in those things. Like in my latest campaign, they were controlling or interacting with multiple military groups, and they were in charge of one of them. And so they were role-playing the exchange between the two moments. They also wanted a real sense of what the battle was like and how that was going. And so there was some area control aspects going on in there. And then, of course, there's the classic gambling and racing games. Those will get in there. But with both of those, I really encourage the narrative element by the players cheating or modifying the game in the game. And in no way, shape, or form, just because an NPC presents a challenge, should they feel like they have to go and roll dice and play cards. They can do these kinds of things. And so that comes up on the regular. And occasionally they have people who are like immortals or gods or demons who are massively bored and want to play high stakes something. And then again, the players are like gambling pieces of their like soul or limbs and other things like that. So their narrative element doesn't go away just because they're now in a game. So I do those a lot.
Okay. How do you go about designing those? Do you come up with them like ahead of time, or do you come up with them on the fly?
Well, it's really unpopular for Gamemasters nowadays, for modern Gamemasters, but I'm in the Gary Ray do multiple hours. Now, Gary averages 4 hours of prep to every 1 hour play. I try to do 2 hours of prep for every 1 hour play at least, but that doesn't always happen.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
How would that, like, how do you fit that into your week? I don't understand how that would even work.
Well, how does Gary do it? I don't know. You sneak it in. Like I have a half an hour writing time. I'm gonna write this game. I know I only have a 3 hour session. I can sneak in like an hour writing time a day and whatever.
I think the answer is he doesn't sleep.
I assume that Gary does that while he's waiting for his Jeep to be repaired, and that every week he has 12 hours of waiting for his Jeep to be repaired.
That is 100% the case with Gary. I don't know. I don't have a personal life, and I don't have yeah. I only have Fight in a Box, and then occasionally the game I run, which is on and off because of adult schedules. Adult schedules really are the bane to all role playing.
Right. Patrick, you mentioned the chase scene cards and whatnot. Is there any other kind of mechanics that you feel when you play a role-playing game and you look at it and you go, when you look at a game and they don't have, because the chase scene is supposed to be, you're running across an entire city, but short of spending 5 gaming sessions running across the entire city, it's the one benefit it did have was that you can encapsulate this running, 5 hour, parkour session in a short period of time. Are there any other game mechanics that you look at and go, God, I wish they would have redone this differently? Because obviously the games, such as that or other things, they put in game mechanics to fit certain scenarios that you can't really get from their normal, whatever the normal game mechanics are.
I guess I don't really think about it that way.
Okay.
Because I don't prepare much, and so I'm really used to just generating like the content or the what happens on the fly. And so I used to prepare a lot. I've just slowly, maybe children had something to do with it, but I've slowly come down to the point where I just look like if we're playing D&D tonight, I'll just look at the map for 20 minutes before I start and kind of throw some encounters in and go. But yeah, so if somebody describes something that's outside of the scope of the rules, I'm just going to come up with something or let them explain it and figure it out. And I'm really careful. I do tend to play a little bit gamist that way because I'm very careful about letting the character do something outside of their field of experience. Like if you told me, if Seppy says there's rules for gambling now, we're going to go gamble, I would be like, sure, you sit down and lose 20 gold pieces because none of your professional gamblers and you're all idiots that are bad with your money anyway. So there you go. That's what happened. Maybe you roll some dice and something extravagant happens, but otherwise you just lost a bunch of money. So
I don't know how I got attributed with this bad idea. Why don't you give Jeff this bad idea, Pat?
all right. Whereas I have a feeling, having played in some of Jeff's games, Jeff would just be like, all right, it's a percentile and you win or lose. Bah. Then we move on to something else. So something more interesting, because gambling is not gonna move the story necessarily.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, but it depends, right, on why is the gambling happening? What
Sure.
are the stakes in winning and losing, and like why is it dramatically important to the characters?
Right. So in my head, I'm thinking the players are just killing time
Right.
at the end of the day or something like that. And they're like, I'm gonna gamble. I'm like, okay, I don't really care what happens during that scene. So
Yeah, I don't run games that have the time for that kind of fluff. I like, oh, you want to go do that? You have a great night, and then we'll go back the next morning. Yeah, I
What
don't
if
run games
what if
for-
one of the players in the group does have that, profession gambling or something like that, and they're like, do you just have them go off on their own and do stuff, or do you let them drag the other players along, and then how would you deal with that?
I guess I would just wait to see what the players did and react to it.
Okay.
I would see how serious that player and that character is about it, and then start writing characters and narratives into that world. Like, I would want them to have some sort of like crushing victory that ends up happening in an abbreviated version of the game, so they get a feel of it in case somebody didn't see it. So, like a hand of poker, how long does that take? Right? You take a dragon version of poker, that's going to take whatever 7 minutes of game time, and then you can heighten the drama without what they're raising and what they're not. And then when they win or cheat or make something happen, then that becomes canon for the next set of stories.
Sure. And certainly if someone showed up a professional gambler as a character in a game, I would start planning something around some sort of plot around that. You win too much money, now someone's mad at you. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
You never lose. The Fae now are involved in by the fact that you never lose.
Now you owe them something. Yeah.
Right. Or you poked a hole in the cosmic skein and luck is draining on you, and it's causing massive mishaps on the other side of the galaxy. Something of that nature. Like, why do you never lose? Like, yeah.
What about
like
things?
that
What about things like? Go ahead.
That is draining luck onto people. That's the kind of thing that makes players really, really uncomfortable. So I ran 2 different times an Unknown Armies game where the players begin the campaign. They're supposed to meet a guy. He doesn't show up, but they find his van in the parking lot, and it is a cargo van filled to the top with money. And they're just like, what just happened to us? We're about to die. And so when things that are suspiciously good happen, players lose their minds.
I've had one group try to retire. They're like, wow, we did this. I think I'm gonna retire now. You don't want to set up your base and do bigger scores? Nope.
I can respect that. I can respect that. And I might also slide across the table. Okay, how about we do the, like, in 10 years, you all get back together because someone's child's been kidnapped or there's very high stakes now, and you have to get control of it.
Yeah.
What about if you go to places like, say, a carnival? The adventure is like the Carnival of Tears, and there's a whole story there. But to kind of give the players an idea of what the carnival looks like, they have to play a few games. Or do you just like, there's games, this is what it looks like, and you describe what other people are playing? Or do you give them a chance to play some of the games and win stuff?
I like really weird games like capturing goldfish with paper nets.
Mm-hmm.
Like things that are like real things but culturally weird for maybe Americans. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
I swear to you all, I had the word goldfish in my head before he said it. I knew Seppy was going to say capturing goldfish or catching goldfish. Anyway, all right, sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, it depends on like the flavor of thing. Like people have role played a lot of fun narrative, like a Battle of the Bands is an example. It's sort of where role playing and mini game like meet, right? And so that kind of stuff ends up in a carnival situation. Of course, there's always, obligatory wrestling or strongman competitions and so forth and whatnot. I, as a rule, always give people bonuses for good role playing. So, like, oh, your idea is better than the other person's idea. And if they just roll dice, they just roll dice. And usually that doesn't go well for them.
Yeah. How do you guys deal with that with people? If you have a player who just wants to roll dice and they don't, they want to roll dice. That's what they enjoy out of the game, is rolling the dice and see how they turn out. Because some players like rolling dice and some people just like the story. How do you balance that in your groups? Jeff, you want to start us on that?
So somebody who accidentally stumbled into one of my games at this time in my life has accidentally stumbled in the wrong place, and that will probably correct itself at the level of players within a couple of weeks. There was absolutely a time in my sort of role-playing career when I was all about that. I played a ton, like not a little bit, a ton of Rolemaster back in the day through high school and college. And those experiences, especially in the group that I played in, was all about tactical nonsense and rolling the dice. I mean, Rolemaster is the system for that, and there are all kinds of interesting things you can do with it. And everybody was on board with that at the time. We did not attempt to have deep story in those games, but that was also a situation where everybody was on board with the same thing in that group. And my guess is, if I went back and examined the cast of players in that game, it wouldn't surprise me if we had people enter that group, decide that was not for them, and sort of self-select back out of it. It doesn't come to mind with me right now. I remember that as a relatively harmonious group of people who all like the same thing, but like also that was 300 years ago. So my memories are probably hazy, but like, yeah, today in a game that I'm running, they probably would just have found the wrong game to run. And certainly I can find something fun to do with people who are fun to hang out with, but like somebody who's just there to grind levels in my RPG is just not, they're not in the right place.
Okay.
Patrick? Yeah, session 0.
Oh. Session 0. Patrick?
I don't know what that is. Help me.
Yeah, tell us what session 0 is.
Session 0 is the onboarding. If you're going to have players play for an extended period of time, you have a session 0, which usually is sort of level setting, world building, and knitting the characters together and into the world, and also gets players buy-in. Yeah. And this is the kind of game it's going to be. This is what it's going to be like. Are you interested in that kind of fun? And it's funny that Patrick said that he's gone from lots of prep to low prep, where I used to be the instant GM for my group. They didn't have any of the guys who had stuff ready, done. The person who would always have an adventure, no matter what the situation or the system, that was me. And then since then, my prep time has gotten longer. I realized that is the world building is the bliss for me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have all these other skills from being an instant GM for 4 decades now or whatever. And so it's like, okay, yeah.
Right. Well, we're talking about kind of like the mini games, and you mentioned gambling, and there are there are multiple different role-playing systems out there. Like generally, a lot of people when we talk role-playing, they think D&D. These days, maybe a little bit of Pathfinder, but there are a lot of games out there, such as Deadlands, where they use literally a deck of cards and they go based off poker hands. And that's just one example. And you can use a lot of card games or board games and build a role-playing system out of it, such as they have Dread, where you use a Jenga tower to tell a story. Are there any kind of things that you guys would do, say, whether it's with your games or someone else's games, or have you ever seen a game where you're like, that would be really cool to incorporate that into a role-playing type system? I'm going to start with Seppy because I know his answer. So go ahead, Seppy. Go ahead.
I constantly sponge. I love interacting with other people, and I literally have a friend of Tower Games whose only job it is to get me to interact with new mechanics and play new things. I won't do it on my own. I'm a deep dive guy. I'll sit in the one place and play with the same 4 Legos forever. But to answer your question, Mouse Cheese, its role-playing game, we designed it with the components in mind because it is the most overproduced $13.50 in the history of gaming. That you could also, as part of the heist mechanic of that, really made it happen. So it's not only just, are you building a game on top of a game like Dread, which is incredible. I love Dread, unless of course you're differently abled, then that's a different story. But yes, it's also the components in the games themselves that can spawn role-playing games. Have you seen Deernicorn games? Any of the stuff from them out in Seattle, Nick?
No, I haven't.
They're like, if you talk about indie role-playing games with just fun toys built in, they're killing it. That's Ross and his commune. Yeah, I would check out. Like, I think they got the rights, or they're now distributing Wander Home, which was a big award winner. But Fall of Magic has this massive scroll
that's amazing.
That you move through, and then they print it. It is all, it's like a, t-shirt shop, but instead for this massively long scroll, Fall of Magic. And then they have custom pieces. And then they have this like best friend game where you mention a thing, why you chose this piece. And I was like, the toy factor for RPGs is going up because people realize that's a way you can actually monetize an RPG. People like us have a real hard time. Not Patrick. Patrick has a napkin, uses it, and then people want to give him a lot of money. But for the rest of us, it's really hard to monetize what we're doing and so forth and whatnot. But people will pay for toys. People will pay for artifacts and relics and so forth and whatnot. See, that cat is now $4 million, if that's a dog. I don't know what it is. But yes, does that answer the question, Nick, or did I old guy like spin off in every direction?
Yeah. I mean, it gives us information and thoughts. Jeff, what about you?
This is a live show.
It is a live show.
I need to come back to the Jenga thing because that's spawned for me so the week before last I was at the Alliance Open House, which is an event where publishers can go to pitch stuff to retailers and help sell those things. And I saw in somebody else's lunchtime presentation the woman who's the, I think, marketing director at the OP, which is what USAopoly is calling itself now. So they are presenting 1 billion products, and she's got this one slide where there's 16 different products, and down in the corner of it, and I can't understand why this would not be the only thing that they talk about for 20 minutes, is a branded Kool-Aid Man Jenga, where there's a Kool-Aid man that like wanders around the table and is in danger of knocking down your Jenga tower. And I believe that is the best branded game idea that certainly I've heard this year, perhaps ever in my entire life. I thought that was just fantastic. How does that tie to role-playing? I'm not sure exactly.
It's all right.
I guess this is a new Dread scenario. Is you're gonna have the Kool-Aid man stalking you around a house,
or like
that's not Kool-Aid. It's blood, kids.
A Kool-Aid Man role-playing game, and it seems to me like a Jenga tower would be exactly the right thing for that. Like short of everyone has a jackhammer, the role-playing game, and the game is to destroy a house.
Or you're the parents who want the house to stay intact, and when the Jenga tower falls, that's when the Kool-Aid man busts through the wall because he
Right.
falls over.
Oh yeah.
There are important narrative moments that have games in it, like J.K. Rowling aside, Harry Potter and chess, plus Quidditch, plus all these other kinds of stuff. When players become the actual pieces on the board of a metagame, I really like a metagame as a narrative. I don't like the distraction time burning that both Jeff and Patrick mentioned, but I like something that gives people a POV of what their character's sort of into, or an abstraction so that they can more reasonably see what is going on in that world, or the stakes.
Right.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, the numbers and the stats are all an abstraction anyway. I would like to see more mechanisms in and around like conversational combat, like debates and other things that would actually teach people, like debating and arguing and so forth and whatnot, negotiating and bartering and that kind of stuff.
So that's interesting, because I think that mini game style things, like gambling especially, might be a good example. They can be especially effective in helping players understand the unfolding process of a dramatic narrative. So there's the novel called Last Call by Tim Powers, which is about a supernatural game that you can play that is vaguely similar to poker, but where you can bet and lose things of substance. I'm probably massacring this I haven't read this for 15 years or whatever, but that, like, things about your personality or nature or your place in life that you can win or lose in the course of playing the game. And so in that novel, the game itself is not very important, but the specific things that happen in the game, so like cards are revealed, and that has a particular meaning in the dramatic narrative. And so everything that happens in the game is tied to something that we care about otherwise, and it just helps us understand what's happening to those things. So I think it's fantastic to use mini game like objects in the game world to make it clear what the stakes are. I think that's fantastic. But if the mini game ever becomes divorced, or if the gimmick ever becomes divorced from the underlying drama, then I think it starts to take away, or it takes away from what I'm most interested in getting out of an RPG. But again, tastes absolutely vary. The thing that goes wrong with me the longer I've been in the game business, and this happens to me more with board games than RPGs, because I just don't work on RPGs very much anymore, is that I've become very obsessive about things that I think are very clever gimmicks or ideas, like whether I have ever seen them before or not, it makes me more interested perhaps than some things deserve. And I don't have anything particular in mind there, but like a prototype that comes across my desk that combines two different mechanics in a way that I've never thought of before will make me very interested in it, even past the point where it turns out to actually be interesting.
Approachability, like I spend a lot of time with new media, right? In any given week, a lot of it. And it is all about approachability and how that factors in us selling new titles and new ideas is a big deal. Like having a successful brand means that folks are more willing to take a chance on your shenanigans and more excited to get on the train. But when you're a small guy, or you're doing something on the outskirts of weird, you've got to do all these extra steps. And I know I have the same problem that you do, Jeff, except for mine are themes. I want that. I want it to be wackadoodle. I love it so much. I get yelled at by everybody about this, but I can't help myself. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. But going to your earlier point about like games in games, as far as narrative elements go, making sure that you're using it as something that drives the story is the real factor for putting in a game your thing, right? Or a certain scene, it drives a certain scene. Like everybody, if anybody's going to do a espionage RPG, you're going to spend some time at the Baccarat table. you know, or like there's going to be this moment for it to give that flavor that can happen, especially because it's quick. If it becomes the whole thing, then whatever it is. But like, as the ball is going around in the roulette wheel and you have an actual roulette wheel for production values, people have to envision what they can get done, or, write down that level of drama in games. That's the kind of things that I would put in. So like, like hearing that sound and like, oh my God, I got to do this thing, that gives them a real moment.
When we're talking about this, we were talking about using games or getting inspired by a board game or a card game. Patrick, do you have any thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, so I would going back a little bit, I'd be really fascinated to try a Wallenstein or Shogun style cube tower or like a horror RPG. So in Wallenstein, and for those in the audience who may not be familiar with an obscure board game from the mid 2000s, there's this cardboard tower that comes with the game, and the tower has a bunch of baffles in it that cross each other as it goes down. And so when you're in combat in the game, your armies are represented by cubes that you drop into the tower, which is really a lovely metaphor for modern combat. And the cubes will sometimes come out the bottom, and sometimes they get stuck in the tower because they're stuck behind other cubes, or they just fell in the baffling. Just so you don't look in, you don't know what the mystery is. Things just come out. And so I think that'd be great. I would love to try that for skill resolution system, where it's like, oh, you want to risk 5 cubes, throw those in, see what happens. And then but the point of Wallenstein is that eventually the cubes will come out. They'll come out at another point in another battle. And so then trying to figure out like, oh, well, 2 of your cubes just fell out. So how is your previous effort now helping the player that's making it a test or whatever? So I'd like to see that. I'd also, yeah. My daughter came in and handed me the puppy that we have. So
That's
sorry
okay.
about that.
It's not the first. Last Game Masters workshop, we were talking about blink dogs, and somebody's like 50-pound dog jumped up on him and started licking his face and knocked him over out of his chair, and everybody was laughing because we were talking about blink dogs just out of nowhere. So.
Out of nowhere, that dog blinks into existence. I'd also like to see a cube puller. Geez, where'd that come from? I'd like to see a cube puller in RPG, so that maybe as you fail more, you put cubes in, so you're later likely to be more successful. Not for any sort of realism, but just for a narrative pull of like, oh, you failed a lot. Well, now you can come back. And
for the record, before he thought of Goldfish, I actually have in the RPG that's coming up for Conquest Princess, it's a bag builder RPG.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. All right, I'm there. I mean, actually, I'm going to hire some people to get there first. So you better hurry. I'm teasing.
You totally could do that.
Wow. All right. So I'm going to preface this question. We got a question in chat, and this is going to be geared towards Patrick. But I want to make sure that the chat knows that because it is related to Root, but Patrick did not work on the Root role-playing game. So what he knows or what he answers is completely up to him, but I want to make sure that the chat understands that. This question is the Root RPG in a setting is it in the same setting as the board game, or is it separate? Do you know? I guess
I don't think I really know. I think canonically it is not in the same setting. That they're supposed to be different settings. And Path, which is the next board game in the Root universe, will also be in a unique setting from Root. So I don't really see why you would care though as a player. I mean, if you wanted to be in the Root board game, then go for it.
Well, they followed it up asking if there was a mechanic to get to use the pieces from the game.
Yeah, I would totally grab those and use those on the RPG. The map comes with some RPGs. The Kickstarter did.
Okay.
And I would totally put those on the map to show the players where the different armies are walking.
I assume you're playing it wrong if you have not purchased 2 cases of Root and used all the meeples from inside.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, and you should really get the deluxe meeples, which are about this tall. So
I would want to play a Root and then have the players play in it, and then they understand sort of the political underpinnings of the world, in the RPG because they understand how the game went and the
Yeah.
machinations. I think that's how those two would make me love both of those even more.
And put it up on the wall and just have it there every week, and maybe like one turn is transpired between each session or something like that.
Well, and then you can do it by season. Okay, this season's going to do this or whatever. This set of years or this dynasty. Like how epic that game was, or how it broke down and those players. But they have agency because they were all playing the various factions, and they understand the things. And somebody did something dastardly, and they're like, "Oh no, our players in this part." I'm like, yeah.
And I think there's a chapter about that at the end of the book about how to merge the two activities together. So, yeah.
So since the Root RPG has come up, I want to put in a plug for Magpie Games generally. Mark and Marissa, who started, are absolutely fantastic people. Mark Diaz-Truman's Cartel RPG, which is based on the Apocalypse Engine game, is essentially Wire, the role-playing game. Wire is the greatest TV show of all time, and that RPG is extremely successful, in my opinion, in adapting the feel of that game. So I think that game is almost certainly underappreciated with respect to its genius. So I just want to call those folks and their company out. You cannot go wrong as far as I'm concerned.
You hooked me up with a discussion with Mark, which was super interesting. And we were talking about him running Magpie like George Clooney runs his own film thing. So Mark has a deal where he does an Avatar the role-playing game or a Root the role-playing game, something that keeps the lights on, keeps everybody happy, brings more people in the brand, and then he has the film or like the thing for him. And the Cartel is one of those, like, this is my game. This is the game that I would want to play. That is magical and and the other games are the ones that he does well. But these are like, how do you do like a role-playing game business? And the answer is get a major IP and get people to buy in.
And I'm sorry I forgot to plug Mark. But yes, I have one copy of it that I made, and it is brilliant and great. And he's very good at they're very good at that. I actually don't have Cartel now I think about it, so I need to go back and maybe I'll purchase a copy.
The Cartel Kickstarter is probably the most money I have ever spent to back a Kickstarter. Like, I got the insanely leather bound version and all the extra stuff. It's really fantastic. It was on the shelf for a while.
Well, Magpie, if you got, they had is it Bluebeard or Blackbeard, which is the
Bluebeard's Bride.
Bluebeard's Bride. Like, even if you never play, owning that object makes you feel good about it. You can flip through it, you can read it, you're like, oh, and that's sort of also a place where you can publish RPGs and feel good about it. You're like, okay, the collector wants it, the collector feels good about it.
But I'm just gonna go right onto Twitter and say that Seppy feels happy about owning a game about domestic abuse.
Wow.
No. Sorry.
We do have somebody new that came into chat, and they said, "Hey guys, I've never played D&D. None of my friends are really interested. How would you guys suggest that a person who's never got to play D&D or role playing in general and doesn't have people interested, how do they find their way in? How do they get in? How would you suggest that?"
It's where they are in life. I would give it very different advice to a 35-year-old gay guy than I would like, a preteen somebody or another. Like, in different groups, finding your social group that you want, like how they get access to other nerds is really sort of where they are in their existence. Mm-hmm. Like, if they're in any kind of school setting, there's going to be a group. If they find themselves sort of in a rural area, then you can find a group online. If you're part of any kind of social subgroup, there's a lot of nerd groups for people so they can feel comfortable playing with people who are more like them.
I think that the fact that it kind of goes to audience and place in the world is extremely relevant. And I would say that you can start people with one session. Like, people have the idea that what D&D means is a 5-year commitment. And so this person's friends might have this idea that they're making a 5-year commitment to D&D when that's not necessarily the case. But like, if that friend group likes the Coen brothers, then they should play Fiasco one time. And if nobody likes it, then it never has to come out again. But at least then they're kind of making the decision about whether to play RPGs from an informed perspective of having actually tried it. Or if they all love Star Wars, then whatever it is the kids are playing these days that is Star Wars related, they should try. If it's heist movies, they should absolutely get out Blades in the Dark, or like whatever. But it really a one session commitment, and one of the indie games that plays in 90 minutes or 2 hours is probably the right way to go, because I think it's possible that a group of people who's like D&D, that's not for me, is like, I have to literally grow a beard and block out 5 years of Saturdays. No.
Right.
You know, they might just not have an accurate idea about
so find something they're like interested in and try and find a system that works.
Yeah, something that group is already like, what is the basis of that group's friendship already? Is it that they are all fans of Dune? Is it that they all like pro wrestling? Is it that they are all golfers? Like whatever it is, there is some adjacent RPG, is my guess, that it's possible to find. And it's certainly possible to experience that in one session of play.
I also like role-playing light type situations, like murder mystery dinners, like little events where they don't realize they're role-playing. At the end, you go, oh, by the way, did you realize you just role-played blah, 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 blah. Right. And then
I
you're
tricked
like,
you role played.
Would you like to, you know, and it's like like Jeff said, it's a finite time. It's an evening. It has food, it has drinks, it has all this other kinds of stuff. Yeah. And see if they like that. Like escape rooms are almost LARPing.
Patrick,
I think it would be relevant to point out that an RPG is essentially a TV show, and there is nobody alive today who does not like some amount of TV generally. Like, it is currently the golden age of dramatic TV. There's just TV for everyone, and it's so fantastic. No matter what kind of TV you like, there's something that nearly everyone likes and relates to. Like, obviously that's a ridiculous generalization, but using that as a metaphor into role-playing games to suggest that it is a periodic dramatic entertainment form where all of the stories tie together in the long term, and that you can binge it or you can take breaks from it, and that now I'm just going back to the same thing where right. People may just not have a common understanding of what that's going to entail, and they may just find elves boring as hell. Like, I think elves are boring as hell. I don't want to play D&D because elves are boring as hell. They just may be bored by elves. Elves are boring.
How do I top that? There's so many good light systems out there right now. I would definitely find a group of people who wants to start with that. And of course, I think the person's asking, how do we find a group of people in that? Of course, depends on where you're at in life. Go to college. Yeah, find some friends there.
My suggestion, personally, from my experience, is obviously, as you guys said, based on life, maybe find a system that's not D&D that they are interested in, or something that's easier to learn and quicker to kind of just get their mouth watered, get their feet wet, whatever. But if you're dead set on I want to play D&D, I'm not interested in other things. D&D online, the D&D Adventure League or Pathfinder Society, those type of things where you can just make a character and walk in and learn, and they can help you go to an event. They have conventions. Every state has cities that have these conventions. These guys that are with me, they know they've been to one or two of those conventions in the world and run things there. So that's my other suggestion as well.
Your favorite local game store wants to help you get started too. They might have advice specific for you and groups you could start with, depending. And your local convention is a great place to start. Especially, I love indie games and I love a con game. Both those things are fantastic.
It's like the Pathfinder Society. They meet every week? Isn't it like every Saturday?
They can meet whenever you want. It depends on who's running it. Like, you can. I think at the Source, which is our local game store. Our local game store does it,
and they must do it every week.
Yeah, I think they do it. I think Fantasy Flight has it like once every month or two for our local area. Like, a couple different stores has like a weekly thing, and and the group's different every time. You show up with your character, you sit down, you play. So So yeah. Everybody that's watching, we're going to take a quick break. We're at about the 55-minute mark. We're going to take a little break. We've got a couple more questions. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat for these guys. I do see that there is a board game question, and you know, if we have time, we'll get to a board game question. These guys know a thing or two about board games, so we'll get to that after we get back from the break. So stay tuned, throw your questions in the chat, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.
Called Crocodile Tears, and the first two follow one character, and then I spin off a character again, spin-off character who is going me, and I run a that's the novella Crocodile Tears. But yeah, a lot of fun. One of the main characters, the one who is the primary character in the novella, is his name is Ting, and if you've spent any time in the Caribbean, you know the accent they
Oh yeah.
So Ting, what's that about? It's because my mother always said I was the prettiest little Ting. And the thing is, he's a Rastafarian troll shaman. So he's 10 feet tall, 5 feet wide, belly out to here, dreads down to here, and his name is Ting because he's a pretty little Ting. You know, so it's a joke within a joke.
I don't read that much in the genre anymore because I'm trying to keep, first of all, if you're going to be a writer, and I write a lot of stories that involve politics and culture and trade and how the systems work, you have to keep up on what's going on in the world. So I'll read a lot of books about current events, things that are going on. I read a lot of books about like geography or archaeology or anthropology, or, you know, and history. I love the history books as well, because when I create a new culture in the world, I'm not just making something up out of the blue. Oh, and I think they'll eat marbles. Yeah, they'll eat marbles, and they'll blow them out their ear and shoot people with them. And you know, you can't do things like that.
Right.
Your cultures have to rhyme with cultures that people are familiar with. So you really should understand the way things work.
Regarding Fate of the Norns, shut up and take my money. There you go.
Oh, it is going to be fun. It is going to be good, and it is consuming all my time, like today.
All right, we are back from our break. Everyone who has stopped in since the break, this is Epic Realms Presents the Gamemasters Workshop. With us is the game designers Jeff Tidball of Prolific Games, Left Justified Studios. The owner of Leader Games, Patrick Leader, is with us as well. And the owner and lead designer of Fight in a Box, Seppy Yoon, is with us as well. We're talking about role-playing games. We're kind of like tossing in how like board games and mini games and stuff into that. Let's switch it up a little bit. Let's talk about when you're choosing to run a system, because we've talked a bit now about systems other than D&D. We talked about some of the smaller publishers games, some of the stuff that's happened on Kickstarter. We've mentioned Deadlands, and we've mentioned Dread, and just to name a couple. How do you guys choose what kind of, when you're putting together a thing and you're like, all right guys, let's role play, how do you choose what system you're going to play, provided it's not like D&D? Do you pick it because it's got a lot of rules in it and you want mechanics where you can have yourself covered? Do you want something that's a lot more loose based, or something that the players want? Maybe not, you don't care more about what you have. So how do you guys choose it? Let's start with Patrick.
I choose it like I am 15 still.
Sure.
And I read a book and go, that's going to be cool to run. I want to run this game. And then I start running it. So I don't really, I think like some people probably generate a story that they want to tell and then start thinking about what system they're going to put that into. But I start with, I read a system and start planning out on how I'm going to do it. And obviously that's going to involve some consent in my group. I'll have to go to them and say, or buy-in, I should say, and say like, hey, do you guys want to play Blades in the Dark next? And this is what Blades in the Dark is about. This is, it's going to be kind of a heist thing, and talk about it that way. And we've just been defaulting in D&D a lot lately because we just finished 2 like 4-year plus long campaigns, and that was D&D. It was just like, we're just dungeon crawling right now, and that's fun, but It's just how we're like kind of pacing ourselves to like before we start jumping into something big again. But yeah, it really is just me. I buy a lot of systems, I read them. I have a stack of books here that is probably, since we moved, this is outside of the collection that's still in boxes, and this is probably a fourth of what I've purchased since we've moved 18 months ago. So I do read a lot of RPGs, and then because of the position I'm in, I do, when I go to conventions, I like to throw a little cash around to help the smaller publishers. So I'll go to a booth and just be like, give me one of everything, it's fine, and walk away with that. So I'm building up a lot of systems because of that. So
Nice. Seppy, what about you?
I play an indie every month as part of Lone Gamers of the Apocalypse. And I'm not really sure what Mark does to determine what we're going to do. We generally vary them in size. Like, we never do something of the same weight. Like, sometimes we do some things from the anthologies, sometimes we do one pagers, sometimes we do small or micro, sometimes we do things from Zine Month. There are a lot of people ideating great ideas, and Dungeons and Dragons is getting a lot of people started in the hobby, and that might be the place that they end up, period. But just like World of Warcraft got everybody into like computer gaming, and then it had this big explosion, I think RPGs is going to have another upsurgence with people. Yeah, and so we've been trying a lot of things out because the answer to your question, Nick, is we pick things because we are writing things in that small RPG space, and we want it to be fun for us, and we want to try it out. Like, we did A Pleasant Evening, which was really fun. It's a 4-act RPG where you have a party, and you don't want it to be too exciting, but you don't want it to be boring, and so that's the goal.
Okay.
So everybody's stressing out that it will be too exciting.
No, like it's a funny thing because as the group, you either win or lose based on whether or not you made this happen. These indie RPGs have these goals, and
that's uncanny
really
because that's how I run all my RPGs. I don't want my people to get too excited, but I don't want them to be bored. So
everyone is. So does that answer your question?
Sure. I mean, it's your answer. You can answer however you want. To be honest.
I
want to get into, after Jeff's answer, if you if there can be another golden age, because I'm that's a very interesting question to me, especially as a businessman in the game industry. Are we going to see resurgence? But let's hear from Jeff first. I'm going to host here.
I was kind of thinking like we'll have Jeff go last because he's worked on so many RPGs that he might have a different insight than everyone else.
I always choose a game based on the story experience that I want to have.
Okay.
So if it is if I'm really interested in playing an investigative story, you would obviously choose Gumshoe. If I've recently rewatched Aliens and I'm desperate to play a story where I'm hiding in a muddy hovel hoping that they do not come kill me, then I honestly don't know what I would pick today to run that. I think I would probably staple onto it a firearms mechanic that I invented for a convention alien game one day, where you multiply the results of 6-siders to get damage results. So you have a knife, you roll one 6-sider, and you obviously don't get to multiply it against anything. But if you have the gigantic machine gun, you roll 66 and then multiply them all with each other. So we've got people at this Con of the North game with their calculators, like adding up, I do 3,600 points of damage, and like a human can sustain 36 or whatever. But it's realistic for the world, right? That machine gun is always going to take apart a dude, and sometimes it will take apart an alien, and it will,
or a lot of dudes,
but like a lot of dudes, absolutely so. But if I am dying to, like, if I have been rewatching The Wire, I'm going to want to play Cartel. So I'm usually choosing a game that is tailor-made for the specific kind of story that has my attention at that particular point in time.
Okay. Do you guys care about the system when you're choosing a game? Like when you're looking at it, it's like, I just, like you said, you just want to play a game. Do you not care if the system is good or bad, or if it's complicated or not complicated?
No, I think the system is critical to getting the right kind of story out. Like I think I pretty much never want to play GURPS. Not like GURPS is not terrible, but it's not for anything. It's for everything, and so it's for nothing.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Mechanics don't back up any particular story. And in GURPS, if I piggyback on that, and that's always been, yeah, that's my issue with it. It doesn't have a mode of telling a story. Like D&D is, you're going to be a kind of a heroic or superheroic person, and because of hit points, because hit points means you don't do anything wrong until you're suddenly down, and GURPS just doesn't fit any. I mean, the books kind of help you try and fit a genre, but it doesn't really hit those very well. So
Yeah.
I care about the mechanics. I care about the stuff. I'm interested in it as a business model. I'm interested in if I could articulate what's the fun of it and capture it and make my players also excited about it. So care is probably not the right word. I will. I'm fearless, so I'll try a lot of things at least once.
Right.
for me, it's important that the system cover at least its bases. And the example I always think of is the Mage Ascension from the 90s, which was one of the White Wolf games, had one of the 9 spheres of magic in practice, which is the foundation of the entire system, was called Spirit, and Spirit allowed you to communicate and summon spirits to serve you, but there was absolutely no rules except GM discretion in the book, which is fine. GM discretion is fine. You should always use GM discretion if you want to change something. But I was like, I just like, if this is going to be one of the pillars of the system, to say that like I have no story concept of what a spirit can do or not do, and I have no basis for what a player should be able to do with it, what the basis for that power is. Whereas you like compare it to Shadowrun, which is just overly overwrought anyway. But like if you summon a fire elemental as a wizard, you knew exactly what you were going to get out of that fire elemental, and I can change it. And the GM can say, well, you summoned a funky fire elemental and it's going to do this week. But in general, a player knows when they wrote down summoning, they knew probably what they're going to get out of that deal. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the
TikTokers talks about like writing novels with magic systems and a loose or hard magic system, like how defined something is and where it is in the story. And it's okay if the whole RPG system is all loose, right? But in that instance, that wasn't. Everything else was much more nailed down.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So consistency is important, and giving somebody a level set if they're going to invest in that character. That would be something if somebody was going to interested in playing that type of character, that in the session 0 or the prequel sessions, you define it. Yeah, and that's a lot of more work for a GM.
Yeah,
it's a lot more work.
Ooh.
So my spin-off question from that is, do you expect, if you're pulling your players together and you're like, we're gonna play this game, one of the ones you guys mentioned, do you expect your players to go and like read that book and learn the rules, or do you wanna, since you're the one running it, do you want to teach them the rules as you go? Like, what is your expectations as a GM, and what do you think new players' expectations should be? New player or new GM's expectations should be?
I think they've got to come with an understanding of the genre. That it's not, I don't feel like it's up to you to explain that D&D is about heroes who go into holes and fight monsters.
Right.
But
they're mole people.
If I'm running a game, I don't expect anybody else to spend any time at all learning the rules.
Yeah, learn as you go with the system, but as like what kind of story you're going to tell, I think that's more important. Which I think Jeff is absolutely right. Like, we're going to do a story in this genre. Be ready for it. And so, yeah.
You know, that's what I'm missing is I haven't been able to get out of D&D because it's so, we just played enough. We know we're going to get out of it, where,
Right.
you know, maybe we need to sit down and say, let's go back to mystery. How are we going to do mystery? And so on. So, do you want Cthulhu mystery or do you want, you know, unsolved murders mystery?
You know, something that I would look out for when you're setting up a new campaign is someone's polite but counterfeit yes to I'm interested in playing with that, because that's a long time commitment, right? But some people will just agreeably say that they're into a thing, or they're like at least interested in trying it, essentially to be polite. And you don't want that player to get stuck in that position. I mean, they're going to spend a lot of time feigning interest at your table. But I mean, and so like the answer to that comes down to just being good at talking to people generally and making sure that they're having a good time. Like, make sure, don't pressure people into playing the game that you want to play, and be on the lookout for the fact that they're actually interested in playing the game that you want to play. But that's like just being a human adult 101, or no, it's being a human adult 301, but still that it falls to us to do that.
Yeah, and also like a time length. Oh, we're going to do this as an experiment. If people like it, maybe we'll start something. And it's different starting a new group versus shifting a campaign. Like Patrick's group is that they're getting the kind of fun, they're connecting with the other players. Hey, do we want to shift this, our time together to this? And that's a different story. That's a different set of
A more
adulting.
casual group. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my group has been one of the players in my group I've hung out with in 3rd grade. So like that's it's a different like level of expectation.
Right.
And he's still just being polite. Yeah, I like.
Yeah,
the
okay.
Patrick.
Cool. Can we play video games? Or...
Unless you're talking about GURPS, and then it's off. Then it's then it's running into the ground.
Yeah.
We have a question in chat. Do any of you keep a generic or specific random encounter or scenario in your back pocket to bring in if you feel like players are getting bored, or the story isn't rolling along as you'd like, or you just want to come up with something on the fly? Do you guys keep something in your back pocket ready at all times for encounters, for random, to just throw something in there, or do you just, if something you need to do something, you just call it on the fly?
Apparently Seppy has a story, but I also have a story. But go ahead, Seppy.
No, Patrick, you first.
All right. So I'm gonna. This is
nice
more,
is at its best.
this is more of an anecdote. When
Okay.
in 2000, I lived in Denver for a year to work for my brother's accounting firm, and I was running Deadlands every week for that year that I was there with a group I just put together while I was in Denver, and I would literally watch at 7:30. I would watch America's Most Wanted, and I would turn whatever that I would do. I'd take a creature out of the bestiary, and I'd ram them together, and that would be that night's story. And no one was the wiser because they were all commuting to my house during that half hour, and then they just pop up with, "Yep, it's this guy has germs in his refrigerator at home, and you got to deal with it." I mean, not that literal, but yeah, that was always my like in extemporaneous plot design. So, but I do have a few notes I keep around for that sort of situation, and I do like to read. Like, I think there's on RPG Now, there's like a book that's like 501 like just 3 or 4 paragraph descriptions of plots. Sometimes they'll put up something like that.
Yeah, like a
Read
little
that.
plot
Read a couple
book.
of those. Yeah. Yep. And I find those like really useful to get out of my own mode of thinking. So
I love, if you've ever watched the old Ghostbusters cartoon, every time I see one of those, I'm like, man, that's a great plot hook for a role-playing game. I'll write it down. Every single episode.
or
Sorry.
Ghostbusters plot.
So Seppy, go ahead. You were gonna say?
As somebody who loves over preparing, you have to understand that you're only going to use 30% of the stuff that you prep. But that doesn't mean that the other 70% goes away. So what ends up happening is the other plot lines and the other stuff that you prep for previous stuff, and depending on where they are in the world, all that stuff is still in motion and still in play, updated by the player's choices. So to answer your question, do I always have something? Absolutely. As long as we're like 1 or 2 sessions in, everything that they did not interact with, which is the majority of the stuff I prepared, is fair game. And so that is the real joy of laying like groundwork and landmines for your players to then make choices into, rather than putting them on rails and having them march through something. And so, yeah, like how you sneak in story and you surround them slowly by story because they're making choices that means the story they left behind is now behind them. If they have to turn around for any reason, figuratively or literally, then they run into it.
So
my answer to that question is the only one that I reliably have in my back pocket is Raymond Chandler's Two Guys with Guns Knock Down the Door. And like that literally works in RPGs in large part because combat takes a long time to resolve in almost every RPG. So during the course of that, the players will be wondering out loud to each other about what the hell these two guys are here doing to kill them. And so they're essentially making up the scenario for you about 5 minutes before you need to run it for them. But it's also like a specific shorthand for the kind of conflict that all RPGs are, is that someone is homicidal towards the players and the game is resolving that.
That's for most of the RPGs. And this is one of the reasons why Wander Home is particularly good. Wander Home has no violence, no stealing. And you don't think that that's exciting. No murder hobos, no, like, and you're literally told in the rules that you should trust people because the world has moved past war. And so what ends up happening is in character creation and how the characters interrelate with each other, you end up creating a checklist of moments or things that are important to that character that you want to sneak into the story. And so that's what ends up driving your actions as a player, this checklist of interactions and things that are important, which is really good. And I did not think it sounded exciting but after I played it, it was, it was great. Absolutely great.
I'm gonna switch it up on you guys. We've got maybe 15 minutes to a half hour. We do have a chatter in here that's asked a couple of questions. They're having a issue putting together like their first gaming session, their first story. I'm guessing that they haven't been doing a lot of playing, so they don't seem quite sure what questions to ask. So I'm going to come back to their questions or some of their statements, but I do want to switch to our last pre-made question because I think it will help them. And what is your guys' process as a GM for world building? Like when you guys are putting together your world for your RPGs, are you coming up with a story for your character, a story that involves all of your characters? Is there like one main character? How do they relate to the world? How do you guys structure that before you start your gaming session? I know Seppy's been talking a lot about world building lately, so we'll start with Seppy.
Oh, okay. I start with, depending on what the genre is, what the end looks like. So if I'm going to do a campaign, is it the end of the world or whatever it is? And then I start backtracking about who cares about that and shenanigans. But to the topic of the day, after I figure out where the world ends, I almost always do a mini game as part of character creation, especially for D&D. And usually it starts with something that's like a split up tarot deck, and then players get things that are elements of the story and the universe that end up becoming part of their character generation process. And usually that includes what I typically call their quintessence, which is who they are in the story. Like if you're the cursed person and you choose that because it's an amount deck, you're like, I don't want to force someone to do this, but they get a number of choices, they prioritize and they get stuff, and some stuff will get handed to them. They know over and over again when something is left up to the universe's discretion or whatever it is, it fits the role of them in the narrative. And they could be like the prisoner, they could be the investigator, they could be any number of shenanigans. And so I start from the end of the world. I give a loose sense of like the type of story I want to have, and then I create a mini game for character creation that ends up like getting their starting place for where they're then going to go to this journey to the end.
Okay. Patrick?
I come up with everything on the fly.
Okay.
And I take some notes. It's funny because I used to do all that on the fly stuff, and my memory was not photographic but very sharp, and I can remember all those details. And then I hit 40 and had 2 children, and now I cannot. Like, there are some sessions where I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I named any of the NPCs last week. This is going to be a problem. So I've learned. I've actually had to start taking notes first time in my life. But I do to any world building I do ahead of time. What I tend to focus on is, I mean, the sets, that's fine, and the technology, that's fine, but I really do focus a lot on making sure that the players are able to meet and interact with somebody from maybe every station or every walk of life in that setting, to kind of give them the kind of the run of how the world works, to see that. So I, someone that's downtrodden and maybe lower class, or maybe someone that's downtrodden in the lower class but actually has a lot of connections, or like has kind of built a little world for themselves, on up to the, to the person that's commanding the players, or the person that can have some sort of influence on the players. And then depending where the action is, where the arena, the story is going to be in that setting, then of course, you didn't have the Matrix with one captain, you saw 20 captains and some character design for all the captains. And so, like, if I was running a Matrix role-playing game, I'd probably flesh out the other captains a little bit.
Okay.
And then the other players could go, well, I know something about their crew, probably based on who the captains are. So apparently I'm going to go start running the Matrix.
Jeff, how about you?
I usually start with a sense of the emotional, dramatic nature of the kind of story that it wants to be. So like when Will and I sat down to start writing Eternal Lies, we had a very strong brief from Pelgrane that said we want to write the modern Masks of Nyarlathotep. So it needs to feel like it is a global struggle against Cthulhuid beings. And so that then can inform, like, every little bit of the thing should feel like it is either part of or leading up to that.
Okay.
And so then once I make sure once everybody's got buy-in to that, right? If people don't want to play that, we've discussed that before. If people don't want to play that, then like that's a problem to start with. But once that is really firmly in my mind, the next thing is like a 1-page or one giant sheet. Who are the actors in this world? Each one of them gets a circle. And how do they want to fuck with everyone else? And that gets an arrow. So this criminal boss wants to kill those guys. These people want to take the money from these guys. And you can generate pretty much all the dramatic action of the entire campaign from who are the players in this world and what terrible or helpful things do they want to do to all the other people. So ideally, you can generate any given adventure in this, or even react to any given thing the players want to do by relating that to the web of relationships that all of these different, individuals or factions or nations or whatever in this campaign have with each other. Now, step 3 for me as a person in my late 40s is to become paralyzed by bullshit and unable to do anything at all. And film school ruined me for this, because in film school, you spend hundreds of hours writing a 100-page document that will be reduced to 110 minutes on a screen. Like, a screenplay is the very most dense implementation of dramatic concepts that you can possibly compose, except for the film that makes it. And so, like, once you have spent so much time obsessing about such a short thing, it's almost impossible for you to, or this is what I find, like, how much work you can put into crafting a perfect scene that involves, and like by perfect, when we're talking about scenes that I have written, not perfect, but you have spent so much time making sure that there is nuance and that all the props are just right to convey the dramatic undertones and the themes of the thing. And that's stuff that you can never do in an RPG because it's improvisational and 6 people are doing it all at the same time. But what that means is that I can get lost so far up my own ass in preparing for stuff that's not even ever going to happen. So I'm really actually very bad at this now. And have been like perfectionism is made me a very bad game planner at this point. Like I haven't run a game for a long time, and that's more about the ages that my kids are and stuff like that. But that's a real struggle for me, is finding the right level of leaving space for players, but also knowing what a tight dramatic tapestry it's possible to weave for them. So step 3 is to disappear into a poof of perfectionism and never actually run the game. So don't listen to what I'm saying.
I liked your number 2 though.
Yeah,
I like the webs of relationships.
I thought that was really good. I can actually
Vampire
see
did
them
that,
sitting
right?
down in like big sheet and
Yeah.
Oh yeah, doing association map is great. But as far as Jeff's and film school, I like to think of the players or into their story like they're the droids from Seven Samurai. They're the two like little peasant guys who are running around the story. Hidden Fortress, who are just sort of tangential, and these other forces have been sort of thrust into it, especially at the beginning when players don't have like a lot of experience for resources, and then they end up choosing sides as just like why are these two guys running into the with guns, and they start building the world around them. But yeah, that's great.
When you guys are building
tonight.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna do that tonight. I'm just gonna walk downstairs and say we're not playing Cosmic Encounter. Let's 2 guys with guns. Let's go.
Don't even define a genre. Like whoever responds to that with a prop defines your genre. 2 guys with guns break in and like, I stabbed them with my sword. All right, it's fantasy. How did those guns get here?
Explain that to me.
There's a 1-page RPG that starts with tying your shoes, and that's like this size, and the rules are each time you start getting very specific, very powerful skills as you go along. I would check that one out. You were gonna say, Nick? I'm sorry.
When you guys are building your system, you have your main guys, whoever your big bad guy that's going to be at the end, the final boss per se. When do you start introducing the seeds for that, and how big of seeds are those for?
I don't think I start with guys. I think I start with the scene. When I say where I want it to end, I have this idea of what is the last scene in the story. Like, is it Hercule Poirot with the big reveal, like her clue, or is it like Frodo, wrestling with somebody in a volcano? Like, what is the final scene going to be? This dramatic moment, because it's a narrative, right? And then, okay, how did we get to this place? And a mystery is, if you're ever interested in writing like a non-improvisational, like where you have clues and hints and all that kind of stuff, you almost always have to start with the end. But you can do it flip side, an improvisational one. The players, by their choices, end up limiting the suspects, and they ultimately are choosing who did it.
Okay.
So there's 2 ways to go about that.
That's a really cool. I think there's a Trail of Cthulhu campaign that works that way too, right? Where the players are creating they just have letters from the future, and they're creating the investigation as they go.
Oh, that's the Paris one? Is that the Bookhounds of Paris?
No, that's the Armitage Files does that.
Oh.
Bookhounds of Paris, you could probably work that into. I may have read all of them.
That's great.
Patrick, what is your thoughts on the when do you start introducing the end game, as it were, or at least the seeds, so they can get to the main bad guy if you have a main bad guy, or the end scene if it's a scene, as Seppy had said?
Oh, I'm terrible about this. I probably do it right away. So like I'm running a mega dungeon in 5e, and I have signposted. The players don't know it, but I've signposted every.
And this is a question from the chat, by the way. They were asking.
Sure, I've signposted every large villain in the dungeon already in some way. So the players at some point are going to have to fight the King of the Chaos Dwarves in this area, and there's been patrols of Chaos Dwarves that have encountered them and things like that. So, or Drager or Druger or whatever the hell they're called in D&D. So And then there's like a large city of these fire people, and they've run into the exile, who is the one fire person that they drove out. But eventually they'll find, and that guy's been tracked down. So they know there's a civilization of them because one's escaped and one has come to find him. So yeah, I sprinkle all those hints in.
And I'll read the question specifically because I was just paraphrasing. It says, I have a couple of long quests. Not sure how early I should plant the 3-ish BBEGs in the campaign, was the specific question. I kind of made it a little bit more of a specific question, but
I would say session 0. Like these can all lead up to it. It's them like signposting what's coming up. It gives them a sense of accomplishment. So they're not just murder hobos. They are leading up to this kind of thing. You know, and they all relate to something. Everything relating to something else is sort of the fun of it. I do some pretty mean things to my players because I like to make really, really, really dark worlds, and I want my players to be the heroes in really, really, really dark settings, like post-apocalypse settings, monster settings, and all this kind of stuff. And that means they have to somehow make moral choices in an immoral world. Like they are the light in the darkness. And that creates really interesting choices. So for me, I ship a Theseus to one of the players. And that was like very dark.
His physical being?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I'm like, okay, he didn't realize this was going on. The player did not realize this was going on because he was on the table and strapped down. And then, so I took a piece off of the player and put it in the box.
By which you mean the character.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, the character. I put it in the box. What you said.
That poor player.
And every time the player trying to like have this important scene with themselves, like, I am me, you cannot say I'm anybody else. And so at the end, this necromancer who's done all this kinds of stuff, has like bifurcated him almost completely, and then he reveals what's in the other box. He's like, if you are you, then who's that guy? And of course, the madness consumes him and he passes out. He doesn't have to answer that question. But this build up to the scene, this dramatic moment is like each of these pieces are being removed and replaced and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
But that's where session 0 is very important, right? Because that is, I think I would have encountered players, my current group, be like, oh, that was hilarious. But but in the past, we ran a Deadlands game where someone had been replaced by the Skinwalker or whatever they're called in the setting. Right. And so was secretly role playing, but he didn't know, without his knowledge, that he was actually one of the monsters in the campaign. And that was a huge safety violation. He got pretty mad about that when he figured out what was going on with his character. So I would say just make sure everyone knows, everyone's on board for the
yes. Yeah. Everybody needs to be on board with that kind of fun. Like, the safe word is banana. Like, seriously, everybody needs to be
talk to your players.
Like, do not. People need to feel not betrayed. They need to feel safe. They need to feel like
And I want to point out on the last show it was brought up that there is a thing you can Google it, and I'm going to just mention it again here. And if you want, you can go back on YouTube. We have all of our previous Gamemasters workshops there. But we talked about, there is a form called the role-playing consent form, and it literally goes through any triggers or issues or sensitivities that players have. It's a form so they can kind of anonymously fill out things so they don't feel called out on any situations, or they don't have to feel like they're being targeted or anything like that. And that way the GM can look at it and go, okay, I'm not going to put kids in danger in this book or in this storyline. I'm not going to do this or that, or whatever it is. So that was really good. And I'm not going to go into detail. A previous episode talked about it, but we brought it up here. So I'm just wanted to reiterate it real quick.
No, that's really important. Like the kind of fun that you want to have. But what's awesome about role playing is it's a blank canvas. You can tell these really gripping, in-depth stories if your players are interested in that. But sometimes you just want to run around a dungeon and blow things up. Yeah, and that is awesome.
Yeah. And going back to the person's question, I'm going to throw in my 10 cents on this. I know I'm the moderator, but I also have a fair bit of experience role playing. so it said again, they had quests and they're not sure. Like everyone here said, you can introduce that bad guy right away because you are the GM. You can take as long as you want for that battle to happen. If you want them to fight the bad guy in 2 gaming sessions, you are in control of that, and you can have that battle happen in 2 sessions, and you can make that bad guy as powerful or non-power. If they're 1st level and you make him 5th level, he's going to be super badass. If they're 20th level, then you're going to have to make him like 30th level to make him badass, but you are in control of that, and you can do it now. Whenever that fight happens, you're in control of when that battle takes place. So if you need to introduce him and then have like minion A and minion B and minion C, and we've actually had a game we played Star Wars, and I didn't know the party's power, and I'm just going to tell this story. I didn't know the party's how powerful they really were, and I was like, yeah, there's this one super, like this one particular soldier that was genetically engineered or whatever, and he's super powerful and really badass, and there's only 12 of them in the world. And the party comes up, and it's like, and of those 12, one is even more like elite. And so they came up and they wiped out 11 of the 12. They came across the 12th guy, and he was a challenge. And then, but they ultimately beat him. And I was like, man, that sucks. And somebody else, you know, and I personally, and I was telling a friend about it, he's like, yeah, just make that one that was really hard one of the first 11, and then up the other guy. So then later they found out that was the case. So it's like, you can make the main bad guy, you can put him in there whenever you want, and you can change it up. If it's not going well, that wasn't it was a doppelganger, you know, whatever you need to do to tell the story that you need to tell, you're in control of that. So introduce the main bad guy whenever the heck you want, like these guys said.
I actually have a different and weirdly specifically mathematical piece of advice for the person asking that question. And this is, again, because of all that money spent on film school, I've got to just spin that out everywhere.
Yeah.
So I actually really like the 3-act structure that's used for modern feature films. So essentially take the length of the campaign and bust it into fourths. The middle half is going to be the 2nd act. So this is a 3-act structure where 25% of the campaign is the 1st act, the next 50% is the 2nd act, and the last 25% is the 3rd act. So the most interesting bit, or the key bit, is the 2nd act, which is half of the campaign, which answers one specific dramatic question: will something or won't something happen? So if that's going to be a gigantic dungeon crawl, the question of that is, can we possibly defeat the evil that lurks at the bottom of this dungeon? And there's going to be a long ass period that's going to be most of the campaign. So but that is literally all focused on one dramatic question, which in a D&D game is based around, can I defeat a thing? But like in a Blades in the Dark campaign, it's, can we defeat this specific other guild of thieves? Or in a cartel game, it is, can we possibly overcome our foes in this drug war or whatever? But then the 1st act, which I think is legitimately gets 25% of the entire campaign, is just making clear to the characters and allowing them to discover for themselves what actually is that dramatic question. So in the 1st session, they might not even understand that this is going to involve a galactic dungeon crawl. They are spending 25% of the campaign understanding the scope of what is the campaign going to be, and that allows them to really own that dramatic question, because they like discovered it for themselves through a series of adventures. And then the last act of it comes out of whether they succeeded or failed at that first part, which is really interesting, because that means they can legitimately fail to succeed in the main goal of the campaign, because the entire 3rd act is going to be, what does it mean for the world, the outcome of the 2nd thing. So like if you go to Eternal Lies, which is that campaign that Will and I wrote, like you can literally see, I'm pretty sure that they are labeled acts 1, 2, and 3. And the specific endpoint of the 2nd act really illustrates the way that I think this ought to work. And the way that the 3rd act plays out in that campaign is totally a reaction to, did the players succeed or fail at doing that thing that they've been doing? That thing that they've been attempting to do, like for probably literally the past 20 sessions of play. So I would say, like, if it's going to be a campaign that you run for 3 months, so it's going to be 12 sessions long. In my opinion, I would say that the first 3 sessions are about finding out what's going to happen, or finding out what are you going to be trying to do. And then those next 6 sessions are going to be struggling to do it. But then the last is going to be, okay, we succeeded or failed at doing that thing. Like, what does that mean for Aunt May? What does that mean for North America, right? So we failed to prevent the aliens from landing on Earth. What is the outcome of that? So that's the structure that I really like. And as a broken person who only learned one thing and has a hammer and everything is a nail, this is the framework that I like for those games. So certainly there are other frameworks, but that one really makes sense to me, I guess, because I spent 2 years studying only that.
I think we need to make a new podcast where we have a group that meets and helps Jeff get to the next stage.
That's right.
I'll get to the next stage.
I actually, so it's funny, I think about the Star Trek 5-act episode, like the 5-act per episode structure a lot too. So maybe I could just tone it down a bit and go down to the 3-act structure.
There you go.
I break up every, like, a campaign is an entire set of stories with one characters in it. And so I break up things by books, and books are generally 1 to 3 adventures in a book, 3 to 5 sessions per adventure, 3 to 5 scenes per session. And
that's
I
a
break
much more sensible way of breaking down a typical RPG, which is a series of discrete adventures that protagonists have. So like a D&D campaign imagined in sort of the classical RPG sense is a lot more like the canon of James Bond things that we have, where James Bond does an adventure and then, like, it's essentially returned to set, and every time it's another James Bond adventure, but really they can come in any order because it just doesn't matter. I mean, so recent James Bond films aside,
right,
that 1 to 3 adventure books in a series is probably better for RPGs than what I described.
At the end, it's very important for the players to feel as though their characters have changed or they have changed the world. Either way, just as a narrative device, like, and it can't just be their stats.
right.
One of the mechanics that I use in my campaign is have them catalog important events or things that they've done as a role player or as a player, and then those end up being currency when they need certain moments to go their way, that they can spend them. And in this way, they feel like it's okay to game the system because I earned the currency that I'm using to get this success that I need.
Awesome. Well, guys, I want to thank you for being on the show and hanging out. To our audience that's watching, if you just came in or you didn't get here after the initial break, or you didn't get here at the beginning, I'm going to give these guys a chance to talk about themselves, talk about their products. These guys are all amazing game designers. They all run some amazing games. I'm going to go right in the order that I have them on my screen. We're going to start with Jeff. Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself, your games, some of your projects that you have coming out, some of the stuff you're working on, appearances, whatever you want to talk about.
Sure. So I'm mostly in board games and card games these days. I run myself a company called Left Justified Studio. Our most recent Kickstarter was called Broken and Beautiful. It's a drafting and set collection card game about kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer. So it's got a really, Patrick Rowland is the designer of this game. My penance for the week is setting up the pledge manager. So people who are interested in finding out more about that can probably follow me on Twitter at Jeff Tidball, and there will be a pre-order link that falls out of there. It's a really, really clever design. It is one of those that did not sell me the first time I played, but my friends kept wanting to play that prototype, which made it clear to me that that was one that needed to get published. So Left Justified Studio, I bought Prolific Games, which is the maker of Flapjacks and Sasquatches, and folded that into my company. I'm also the CEO of Worldwise Imports and Play All Day Games. Worldwise Imports imports chess sets and backgammon sets and go boards and things like that. Play All Day Games publishes Catapult Feud in North America, which is the game of exactly what you think it is. You build castles and shoot rubber band powered catapults at them to knock them down. If you're a Flapjacks and Sasquatches fan, next year look for a Kickstarter for a Flapjacks and Sasquatches dice game. So the very most important thing to me is a game that, if I'm lucky, will kickstart next year. My college and like high school obsession game was Car Wars. I played an infinite amount of Car Wars and loved the hell out of it. I've been working for on and off, obviously, for 8 or 9 years on a game called Grav Strike, which is a hover tank combat game that started out with the design challenge of figuring out what would Car Wars look like today if it were designed to a modern game design sensibility. In the meantime, since I started doing that, Car Wars itself answered that question, and Car Wars 6th edition is actually, I think, a perfectly good answer to that question. My answer was different, but that hopefully will kickstart next year and be published the year after that. You can probably find a Facebook group for that's floating around. All of the rest of the stuff in my life has taken over my attention, and that game is not getting the attention it deserves, but that's going to change in 2023. So if that sounds remotely interesting to you, track me down or track that down and pay attention and look for a Kickstarter.
We should play some Grav Strike. I like
yeah.
Car Wars. I used to play Car Wars with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should play some. That'd be fun.
Did you know that the Spark is still meeting?
I did not know that Spark is still meeting.
St. Paul area Road Knights. It was once the second most active American Auto Duel Association fan club in North America.
That's amazing.
Played like in my basement in college. That's probably where we played.
We met. Yeah. I came over to your house and played Car Wars in your basement.
Brian Strassman, I believe, is still the president of Spark, and I think there were emails today even that they're meeting and playing Car Wars Classic rules. So they're playing 5th edition and building the cars with the spreadsheets and doing the thing. But
wait per shot.
That's wait per shot, baby.
Patrick, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your games. Tell us all of the things.
So I mostly spend my managing the team of people that does things, and but we are currently working on. We had a Kickstarter last. I don't know. It's COVID time, so my brain's a little fuzzy. Anyway, we kickstarted this brilliant 4X game called Arcs, and in Arcs you are building a kind of a stellar nation among other stellar nations, and you are the way you select actions in the game is you play cards from your hand, and it kind of has, you're not trick taking, but it has an element of like you have to play on suit, and you have to play a higher number on suit to play a card, or you have to play something off suit and then just get one action from doing that. And that's pretty cool. And then the reason it's called Arcs, of course, is because you can play the game out of the box, just one session, but there is also a 3-session kind of chronicle you can play, and then that will break into different paths that the players can explore, so they can play that multiple times. We are also currently shipping a game called Ahoy, which is based on a design by Greg Loring Albright. And it is a game about, it has the kind of anthropomorphic animals Root does, but there's also people in the same setting. And you're playing kind of asymmetric high seas adventure. I've been careful to avoid saying piracy because there actually is very little piracy in the game. So you can definitely fight each other. But
I feel bad. I intentionally put your face next to the little bottle with the skull and crossbones on it just because it's of Ahoy.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. And then I personally am working in the studio a lot lately. I've been just kind of cooking designs in Incubator for the last couple of years inside the company. A lot of failures because I'm kind of getting back to learning how to game design, because I really haven't done much since the Root expansions. And I'm currently working on an older design called Path, which is an open world adventure game in the Root setting.
Nice. And you also have, since we're on Twitch right now, you also have Leader Games Media, which is your group solo chat right here on Twitch. And they were playing Ahoy the other day. I was in there hanging out and chatting.
In our new studio. We just bought a building, which is a weird thing to say. So and then follow Leader Games on Twitter, follow Patrick Leader on Twitter if you just want to hear my ramblings, or my I do a lot of AMAs about the game industry.
Wonder how long I can sit here before Seppy loses his mind. Seppy, go ahead and tell us about all your stuff. Or don't. It's like,
I'm
oh, he's
Seppy,
turning
Chief
it back
Game
on me.
Designer. Yeah, Nick helped out at our Gen Con booth. It was great. Our next title is Conquest Princess. It's a co-op bag builder where you use fashion to overcome galactic tyranny. It's mind-meltingly hard, and the theme is sort of Barbarella meets Power Rangers. It is really good. We've been working on it. This 9th build is finally stuck. I've been working on it for 6 years. It will have a companion micro RPG, which is a bag builder. You can look for that. It probably around April coming up this year. Otherwise, the digital release of Squirrel or Die is this week. That's happening. So if you want to see what our backpack series is like, it'll be available on the Sovereignty platform for free to play for the month of October.
And for those that are watching the stream, you guys have seen me on the Sovereignty app playing some of the games on there. So I will probably get more. I'm actually looking to get, I'll probably end up getting Danny on the podcast down the road here to talk about Sovereignty in a bit more detail. Speaking of the podcast, for those of you guys that are watching, much to earlier chat's chagrin, October 3rd, we're going to have Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games on. We're going to talk a little bit about GURPS. We're going to talk about Munchkin and all of their other stuff, probably a little bit about Car Wars as well. So Steve Jackson is going to be joining the show October 3rd. October 17th on the podcast, we're going to have Nerdy on, hip-hop nerd, singer, rapper. He had to make some amazing music. He's a fan of all kinds of the same stuff that I'm a fan of, so I can't wait to have him on. We're also going to, on October 31st, we're talking about role-playing. There's a new role-playing company called Evil Genius Games. It's making a bunch of pop culture movie RPGs, and we're going to be having Siegfried Trent is going to be joining us to talk about their gaming system and the games and the pop culture references and all that, and that's going to be on Halloween of all dates. And then November 14th, we're going to have Dave Schrader from Discovery. He is on the brand new show, Ghosts of Devil's Perch. He is also one of the lead investigators for the Holzer Files. He also hosts Paranormal 60 anywhere you get your podcast. So these are some awesome guests. So make sure you follow us here, follow the podcast, subscribe, go back and watch the previous episodes with Jeff Tidball, with Patrick Leader, with Seppy Yoon. Listen to all of those episodes. They're amazing. I think most of those are all on YouTube as well now, as well as anywhere you get your podcasts. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Hopefully you guys had a fun time. It's great to talk and see different perspectives on role-playing and get some info out there. And for anybody who is watching to get to learn this, this show will be live on YouTube, or will be available tomorrow on YouTube. So this will always be out there for people to view and watch and utilize and enjoy. So, and for the next 60 days, it'll stay here on Twitch as well. So thank you guys all so much for joining us. We're going to do a raid. We're going to raid out to I have a friend, a streamer who is role-playing with a bunch of other friends and other streamers that are part of this community. One of my moderators is over there role-playing. Since we're talking about role-playing, we're going to send you all over to Teddy Warhorn. So thank you guys all so much for hanging out tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we will see you down the road.